And now for something completely different, story time with Bryan. This is a short story I wrote titled, A Series of Unfortunate Prop Strikes. Today was a crap day. I planned to go to the airport and knock out this instructional flying video for my YouTube channel, but I was tired, hungover, and I forgot to eat dinner. It was the perfect recipe for an aviation disaster. Maybe flying will make me feel better, I said aloud. This startled people in the theater next to me. Screw this, I'm out. Now they were getting agitated, one of them screaming, "Sterile theater!" I can take a hint, so I headed to my hangar. I thought I would fly to this little uncontrolled field so people aren't looking at me like I'm a dumbass while I'm filming myself making this great safety video for the greater good of the flying community. I get to the airport, I start the engine, and for whatever reason, the first time in like maybe 100 hours, I didn't do a big walk around on my airplane as part of the pre-flight, and that's going to prove to be a mistake that's going to come into play in the very next sentence. You'll see. I started to taxi and all of a sudden, wham! This traffic cone goes flying down the ramp. Told ya. Well, there goes the hole so people aren't looking at me like I'm a dumbass, along with a parking cone that's traveling down the ramp about 30 yards, stopping only when all momentum is removed by the window of a 182. And I mean, it shatters it. I kept thinking, this day can't get any worse. That's when I realized there's someone in the 182. A man and a little Labrador puppy either just landed or were about to take off for a flight. I shut everything down, I walk over to the guy and I see he's bleeding from his temple. Right away he begins screaming and clenching his fists. My mind was a total blur, my head was spinning. I couldn't make out all of his rant, but I heard the phrase "my lawyer" clear as day amongst the slew of verbiage coming from his face. He's bleeding very badly now. I tell him I've got a first aid kit in my plane, I'm gonna run and get it. I'll be right back, I shouted as I hustled to my airplane. Full-blown panic sets in. My hands are shaking and the whole fight or flight thing, literally in this situation, are engaged in my little tiny pilot brain. I don't know what I was thinking, but I chose flight. I just fired up my plane and taxied away. I guess nobody realized what had happened because I made my call to the tower and they were all Tree 6, VO, Bravo, and Alpha. I hate it when they say tree, it's just weird. So off I went. I took off and flew while feeling terrible and lightheaded. Slowly it began to set in what I'd done. I'm such an idiot, I thought. I made the worst, most irresponsible, unsafe decision of my flying history. I can't believe I chose to fly on an empty stomach. I bypassed the whole I'm safe thing completely. In this moment, I just hated myself. I turned the autopilot on because I was flustered and trying to collect myself. I really wanted to film my video on how to be your own safety pilot. I put on the goggles and went through the whole thing, and it was really good stuff. I never felt unsafe because the autopilot was on and I could see traffic on the fish thing. It was about this time that I began to realize I'd made a huge mistake. I dropped my head in shame, thinking about what I'd just done. It was terrible. Instead of hitting record, I'd hit the power button. This is the worst thing that ever happened to me. I didn't film any of it. Whatever, just go somewhere, I said. Cruising along and thinking to myself, there's no way this day could get any worse. It's at that point that I looked down and noticed the autopilot wasn't engaged. I never turned it on. I probably drifted easily 1, maybe 2 miles off course by now. I had no way of determining where I was. I had a flight bag with sectionals, E6Bs, and protractors, but nobody knows how to use that crap. It's all just for show. I grabbed the far aim to see if it had any location references in it, but there was no way to get it open. It was still wrapped in plastic. The situation was grim. For reference, imagine yourself in a sinking boat, and the only thing you have to save you is a flight bag with sectionals, E6Bs, and protractors. Now swap the boat with a plane and sinking for flying, and you understand exactly how dire the situation is. Now I'm hungry, I'm lost, and probably a murderer. I'm sure there's a little dog licking the cold, dead face of a 182 pilot on the ramp. I decide this has to stop. I chose to land at the nearest airport, and it just so happened to be an airport where I used to go for barbecue when I was in training. I planned to land, call the authorities, and let them know what I'd done. I shut my plane down on the ramp knowing I just had my last ever flight as pilot in command. I look over in the distance and I notice the barbecue lady's picking up a couple that flew in, and she looks at me and says, "I got room for one more. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it, Bryan." I mean, it's good barbecue. I'll make the call afterwards. So I hop in the car and eat what will no doubt be my last meal as a certificated pilot. The brisket was awesome, and I mean juicy, moist, fall off the bone. Does brisket have bones? Might have been ribs. No matter what, it was outstanding food. It's funny how a little food in your belly changes everything. I decided since I'm going to lose my license and I'm going to go to jail, I better fly home and deal with what's coming in person, face to face, man to man. I fly back to my home field and land my plane on Tree 5 one last time. I can still see the 182 with the cone embedded in the windshield. The man is there. He's talking to 3 people. One has a badge. He starts pointing at me. I know I'm screwed. So I taxi over. As I'm taxiing, my heart sinks, my chest gets tight, and all of a sudden, wham! My prop hit something. I look out the pilot's side window just in time to see a little Labrador puppy go flying about 30 yards down the ramp right into the windshield of a King Air. There were little pieces of that puppy everywhere. Sure enough, a guy comes climbing out of the king air with a rare albino Jamaican seeing eye deer, his forehead bleeding, and he starts screaming and clenching his fists. I said, "Hold on, I've got a kit in my plane with bandages. I'll bring it over. We can get you fixed right up." So here I am, circling over North Texas. I have a few hours of fuel remaining, nowhere to go. Starting to get dark, and once again, I'm getting hungry. I know when I land, his deer is going to go flying into the windshield of a 737. What a really, really bad day this has been. And I still have a huge mess to deal with down there, and I don't know how to clean it up. And by mess, I'm talking about my propeller. I don't know how I'm going to get all of the puppy bits off of it. It's also worth pointing out that I'm well aware the puppy's not the worst of my problems. I still have to go back up and record that safety video.